The streets were blanketed in white, the snow falling thick and fast, creating a desolate scene of frozen emptiness. A young black teen, barely 15, ran through the storm with a newborn cradled in his arms. His breath came out in ragged gasps, each step harder than the last as the wind howled, biting at his exposed skin. The baby's cries were barely audible over the roar of the wind, its tiny face flushed red from the cold, eyes wide in fear and discomfort. The teen's face was a mask of determination, his features sharp and focused, despite the exhaustion in his limbs. His heart raced, his body aching, but there was no time to stop. He had to keep moving, had to save this child, no matter the cost. The snow swirled around him, the world a blur of white and gray, but his mission was clear. In the freezing cold, a young black teen, without a second thought, risks his life to save a millionaire's newborn from certain death. What he didn't know was that this act of bravery would change his life forever, making him an heir to a fortune he never dreamed of. The wind howled through the barren streets, whipping the snow around in furious gusts. The young teen, Marcus, staggered forward, his breath visible in the freezing air, each step growing heavier with exhaustion. The weight of the newborn in his arms was almost unbearable, but he couldn't stop now. The baby, barely a few days old, had been abandoned on the side of the road, wrapped only in a thin, threadbare blanket. Its tiny body was cold to the touch, its cries weak and desperate. Marcus's heart raced as he struggled through the snow, his hands trembling with the effort of holding the baby steady. His jacket was no match for the frigid wind, and his fingers were numb, but he couldn't stop. The baby needed warmth. The baby needed safety. "Mama, I'm coming." "Hold on," he murmured softly, though he knew the baby couldn't understand. His voice was a weak, soothing attempt to comfort, but all he could do was try to keep the newborn close to his body, hoping the heat from his own body would offer some protection from the biting cold. The snow stung his face, but Marcus didn't slow down. His mind was focused solely on getting to shelter. He couldn't let the baby die out here. Not like this. He had to get help. Through the haze of snow, he saw it. A large house at the end of the street. The mansion was tucked behind tall iron gates, the lights in the windows barely visible through the storm. Hope surged through Marcus as he made his way to the front door, his body shaking from the cold, but his resolve unshaken. He banged his fist against the door, the sound muffled by the howling wind. His breath came in shallow bursts, his chest heaving. When the door finally cracked open, Marcus looked up, his face pale and streaked with snow. Behind the door stood a tall man and a woman, both dressed in elegant clothes that seemed so out of place in the harsh winter storm. "Please, help," Marcus gasped, his voice trembling. "The baby, she's freezing." The woman's eyes widened in shock as she saw the baby in his arms. Without a word, she stepped aside, allowing Marcus to stumble inside. Her husband followed closely behind, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. "Bring her in, quickly," the woman said, her voice shaking as she reached for the baby. "What happened?" Marcus, his breath shallow, managed to explain between gasps. I found her out there, alone, just abandoned." The man, Andrew Collins, stared at the baby, still in shock. "How do you know it's ours?" he asked, his tone laced with doubt. We didn't leave her out there." The woman, Victoria Collins, gently pulled the baby from Marcus's arms, cradling her against her chest. She looked down at the child's pale, almost lifeless face, and then back up at Marcus. "This is our daughter," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But why? Why was she out there?" Marcus felt his heart race at the implication. He had no idea how the baby had gotten outside. He hadn't even noticed the carriage or any sign of the parents. He shook his head. "I don't know. But she's alive because of you. You saved her." Andrew looked at the teen, still unconvinced. But the urgency in Victoria's voice seemed to change his mind. "Get him some blankets and warm tea," he said, finally breaking his gaze away from the baby. "We need to get him warm. He saved our daughter's life." Victoria nodded, her focus still on the baby. She moved quickly, sitting down on a nearby sofa, rocking the baby gently in her arms as she tried to warm her. The sight of the baby's little hands, still cold despite being wrapped in blankets, sent a shiver of panic through her. "I don't understand. How could someone do this?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Why would anyone leave a baby out here to die? Marcus stood quietly by the door, still shivering, but his mind was in a haze. He couldn't fully process what had just happened. He had gone from a boy just trying to survive to saving a life he didn't even know he was destined to save. He was in a mansion now, in a place where he never belonged. But as he looked at the couple, at the warmth and comfort surrounding them, something inside him clicked. These were people who had everything, and he had nothing, but somehow they were connected now. They owed him their daughter's life. They owed him more than gratitude. As Victoria continued to soothe the baby, Andrew walked over to Marcus, who was still standing stiffly, his arms wrapped tightly around his body for warmth. "Thank you," Andrew said quietly, his voice finally softening. "I don't know how we can ever repay you for this." Marcus looked at him, his eyes still uncertain. "I didn't do it for a reward. I just couldn't leave her out there. She's a child, a baby." Andrew nodded slowly, clearly moved. "You're right. But you've done something for us that we can't ever repay. Your bravery, your selflessness. It's more than most people would ever do, and I think it's time we do something for you." Marcus blinked, confused by the words. "What do you mean?" Andrew turned to Victoria, who was still holding the baby close, and then back to Marcus. "We want to make sure you have everything you need to build a better life. I'm offering you a scholarship, anything you want to study, anything you need to get ahead. You've shown us what kind of person you are, and we want to give you the opportunity to make your future as bright as possible. We also want to make sure your family is taken care of. A job, housing, whatever you need." Marcus stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. I don't understand," he stammered. "Why? I don't deserve this." Victoria looked up from the baby, her eyes meeting his with warmth. "Yes, you do. You saved our daughter. You've shown more courage than most grown men, and you deserve the chance to make something of yourself. You deserve a future." For a moment, Marcus didn't know what to say. This wasn't the life he had expected. It was too much. But as he stood there, looking at the family he had saved and the world they offered him, he realized that this moment, the fire, the danger, the act of saving a life, had led him to a future he never imagined. A future that was now in his hands. Over the next few days, Malik found himself at the Collins mansion, recovering from the harsh ordeal of the storm. The cold had seeped deep into his bones, and though he had fought against it in the desperate moments of the rescue, his body had paid the price. Victoria insisted he stay at their home to rest and recover fully, something Malik had never expected in a million years. To him, this family was nothing more than a distant symbol of wealth and privilege, but now they were offering him warmth and shelter without hesitation. Victoria was an attentive host, bringing Malik food, checking on him regularly, and ensuring he had everything he needed. She sat with him for long stretches, talking to him about his life, his dreams, and what had brought him to the point of saving her daughter. Malik, though initially reserved, found himself opening up. He told her about his struggles, how he had worked odd jobs to help his mother make ends meet, how he had never had much in life, but he had learned to make do with whatever he could. Victoria listened intently, her heart aching with compassion for the young man sitting before her. "You're incredible, Malik," she said, her voice soft. "Most people would have turned away. But you didn't hesitate. You saved my daughter's life." Malik, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the praise, shifted in his seat. "I just did what anyone would have done. She's a baby, and she needed help." Victoria smiled warmly, but her eyes showed something deeper, genuine respect. "Not everyone would have acted so selflessly, especially given what you were up against. You're a good person, Malik." He looked away, his thoughts tangled. "I'm not so sure about that. I've done things I'm not proud of. But I did what I could. I couldn't just leave her out there." Victoria could sense his humility, his uncertainty. She reached over and placed a hand on his. "You saved her. That's all that matters. I'm proud of you, Malik. We're all proud of you." Malik felt a swell of warmth in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time: acceptance. In the days that followed, he began to feel more at ease with the Collins family, even though Andrew, Victoria's husband, remained somewhat distant. Andrew spent most of his time in meetings or focusing on his work, always preoccupied with business affairs. It was clear that he didn't fully understand why his wife had taken such an interest in Malik, and there were moments when his eyes would linger on the young boy with a mixture of curiosity and something less inviting. Skepticism, perhaps. Victoria, however, continued to invest time and energy into getting to know Malik. They talked about everything, from childhood memories to hopes for the future. She began to trust him, believing that the young man before her was more than just a hero. He was someone with great potential, someone who could do incredible things if given the chance. As Malik grew more comfortable with the family, he could see how different their world was from his. The Collins house was filled with luxuries that he had only dreamed about, but for all the grandeur, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong in this world. No matter how kind Victoria was, no matter how much they offered him, Malik couldn't escape the nagging feeling that he was just an outsider, an imposter in a life he didn't know how to navigate. A week later, the Collins family hosted a private gathering at their mansion to celebrate the recovery of their daughter, the life Malik had saved. The event was a grand affair, filled with wealthy guests, sparkling chandeliers, and the kind of luxury that Malik had never seen in his life. He had been invited as a guest of honor, yet, as he stepped into the lavish ballroom, he couldn't help but feel out of place. He was wearing a suit that had been provided to him by Victoria, but it felt stiff, the fabric foreign against his skin. He stood at the edge of the room, awkwardly shifting between conversations, trying his best to blend in. People in expensive suits, holding glasses of champagne, laughed and chatted, unaware of the teen standing on the sidelines. Victoria caught sight of him and came over, her smile genuine. "You look great, Malik. Come, join us." Malik smiled faintly, feeling the weight of all the eyes on him. "I'm okay, just not used to all this," he admitted. his voice soft. She laughed, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "It's overwhelming, I know, but you belong here. You've earned it." He nodded, though the words felt hollow in his throat. He wasn't sure if he'd ever truly belong in a world like this. But he was grateful for their kindness. He'd come to see that they weren't just offering him a life of luxury. They were offering him an opportunity, a way out of the circumstances that had trapped him for so long. As the night progressed, Andrew walked over to Malik, his expression more serious than before. "I've been watching you, Malik," he said, his voice low but steady. "You have a good head on your shoulders, a strong moral compass, but I can see that you're not sure about where you fit into all this, into our world." Malik hesitated. "I don't really know what I'm doing here, sir. I don't belong in a place like this. I'm just a kid who got lucky." Andrew studied him for a moment. "It's not about luck, it's about potential. You've got something inside you, Malik, something that could change the course of your life. But it won't happen unless you start believing in yourself." Malik felt the weight of Andrew's words sink in, but he still wasn't sure how to respond. What did someone like him do with a life that had been given to him so suddenly? "Have you ever thought about legacy?" Andrew continued, his eyes thoughtful. "What we leave behind, who we impact. It's not just about business. It's about the kind of person you choose to be. And you, Malik, have the power to make a difference." The conversation lingered in Malik's mind long after the event ended. He thought about what Andrew had said about legacy, about the future. He had never considered his future in such grand terms. His life had always been about surviving, about getting by, not about leaving a mark. But now, something had changed. He felt a stirring inside him, a deep recognition that his actions, his choices, had the power to create a legacy of their own. It wasn't just about being saved. It was about using what he had to do something meaningful. And as the night drew to a close, Malik realized that this was only the beginning. The Collins mansion had never felt so quiet. The air was thick with unspoken words. As Andrew sat at the head of the dining table, his hands clasped in front of him, his face, usually so composed, now showed signs of the stress that had been building for months. His health had been deteriorating rapidly, and the weight of his failing body mirrored the pressure on his shoulders. The future of his company, his fortune, his legacy, all seemed uncertain. Victoria sat beside him, her posture tense, but her eyes were calm, as if she had already made peace with the decision they were about to reveal. Across from them sat Malik, his heart racing in his chest. He had come to the meeting expecting a casual conversation, maybe more gratitude for his act of heroism. But what was about to unfold was far more profound. Victoria took a deep breath and, with a soft but resolute voice, began, "Malik, we've been talking for a while about what the future holds, and we've made a decision that we need you to understand." Malik blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Andrew's voice, though weak, carried a weight that struck Malik's heart. "We're not sure what the future holds for me, Malik. My health is failing, and I've spent my life building this company, this wealth. But what I've realized is that it's not enough for just my son to inherit it. You've shown us something invaluable, courage, honor, and a selflessness that most people would never understand." Victoria looked at him with warmth in her eyes. "Malik, the moment you saved our son's life, you became more than a stranger or a savior. You became part of this family. And we've decided, when the time comes, a portion of our fortune will be yours. You'll inherit it." The words hung in the air, heavy and incomprehensible to Malik. He blinked again, as if trying to process the gravity of what they had just said. "Wait, what?" he asked, his voice faltering. "You're offering me what?" Andrew nodded, though his expression was a mix of pride and hesitation. "We've been through a lot as a family, Malik, and through it all, we've come to see that you embody the values we want to pass on. Our company, our wealth, it's all in jeopardy because of my health, but we've made arrangements. We want you to be a part of it." Malik's mind was racing. The idea of inheriting such wealth, such a life, was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. He had come from a place where survival was the focus, where every day was a struggle to make ends meet. And now he was being offered a fortune, a legacy that had taken this family generations to build. "But I don't deserve it," Malik stammered. "I'm just a kid from the street. I saved your son, yes. But this isn't something I've earned." Victoria placed a gentle hand on his. "Malik, you saved our son, but you've done more than that. Your actions reflect the kind of person you are. You're not just a boy from the street. You're someone with a heart full of purpose, and that is what makes you worthy of this inheritance, even if it feels strange to you." Andrew, though still uncertain, added, "You're everything I want my son to be. Strong, moral, compassionate. I've spent so much of my life focusing on building a legacy that I didn't realize it wasn't just about wealth. It's about passing on the values that matter." Malik felt the weight of their words, but his mind was still spinning. He had always fought to survive, never dreaming that one day a life of comfort and power could be within his grasp. He had been given a chance, but what did it mean for him? How could he fit into this new world without losing himself? That night, as Malik lay in the guest room of the Collins mansion, the weight of the decision gnawed at him. He stared at the ceiling, his thoughts a whirlwind of doubt and disbelief. Everything had changed so quickly. One act of courage, one decision to save a life had led him here, to this point. And yet, he wasn't sure if he was ready to accept it. His mind kept returning to his roots, the struggles he and his mother had faced, the hardships they had endured just to get by. How could he reconcile that life with the wealth and privilege now being offered to him? How could he accept a future that seemed so foreign, so removed from the reality he had always known? The next morning, after her restless night, Malik found himself standing in front of the mansion's grand windows, looking out over the expansive lawn. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow on the lush gardens. The life he had always dreamed of seemed so close, yet so distant at the same time. Victoria found him there, standing in quiet contemplation. "Malik," she said softly, walking up to him, "we've given you this opportunity, but we also want you to be true to yourself. No matter what, you have to stay who you are." Malik turned to face her, his expression filled with uncertainty. "I'm not sure I belong in this world. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all of this. It feels like I'm living someone else's life." Victoria smiled warmly. "I understand. But I believe in you, Malik. And so does Andrew. We're not asking you to change who you are. We're asking you to be a part of our family and to help us change the world in the way we know you can." Malik felt a weight lift from his chest. This wasn't just about wealth or privilege. It was about using what he'd been given to make a difference. And that, he realized, was something he could embrace. "I'll do it," Malik said quietly, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. "I'll accept the inheritance, but I promise I won't forget where I came from. I'll use this chance to help others, to make sure no one has to struggle the way I did." Victoria's eyes softened, her pride in him evident. "That's all we want, Malik. We want you to make a difference, to carry on the legacy of not just wealth, but of integrity and compassion." As Malik spoke those words, he realized something profound. This was not just an inheritance, it was a responsibility to honor the trust that had been placed in him, and to ensure that the fortune he had inherited would be used for good. This was his new life, one he would build with purpose, with the values that had always guided him. A few weeks later, as Malik stood beside the Collins family at a community event, he felt a deep sense of pride. He had been officially welcomed into their family, not just as a beneficiary of their wealth, but as an equal, as someone who would carry their legacy forward. Malik glanced around at the crowd, at the faces of children, families, and the people who had supported him, and knew that he had made the right choice. His life had been transformed, but it wasn't just about wealth or status. It was about using his new position to create change, to help others rise above the struggles he had once faced. With Victoria and Andrew by his side, Malik had found his place in the world. And he knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that would lead to a future filled with purpose, impact, and the chance to build a legacy of his own. Malik stood at the front of a crowded hall, a microphone in his hand as the warm glow of soft lighting cast shadows on the faces of the audience. Before him, banners adorned with the words, "The Malik Jacobs Foundation," proudly hung, a testament to the journey he had undertaken. Behind him, a table was filled with donations and items that would support underprivileged families, a direct result of the fortune he had inherited. The crowd, a mix of wealthy donors and grateful families, listened intently as Malik spoke with quiet authority. "Kindness isn't about grand gestures or seeking recognition," Malik said, his voice steady, yet filled with passion. "It's about seeing someone who needs help and choosing to make a difference, even when the world tells you it's not your responsibility. Stop. One act of bravery, one decision to help, changed everything for me. And now I'm here to make sure that same opportunity is available to others." His eyes shifted to the back of the room, where the Collins' newborn son, now healthy and thriving, sat in his father's arms. The sight filled Malik with a quiet pride. In a world where everything seemed stacked against him, Malik found his true family and his purpose. But for Malik, the journey had only just begun.